Good morning, everybody. While we go around the table, we have some new faces here. Bob Connors, Chair, Building Committee.
Eric Swan, Vice Chair.
Zal Tonsak, Context Architecture.
Mike Riley, Police Chief.
Steve Theron with Vertex. John Lemay with Vertex.
I want to make an announcement, for those that don't know it. Kevin Heffron has had a medical setback and currently is recuperating at home. And so John and Vertex has come in today, wanted to introduce Kevin's, I guess, temporary replacement. You can get into that when the time comes.
Yeah.
But I personally wish Kevin the best and a speedy recovery. All right, so let's go down the agenda. All right, item 1.
Bob, here's the next agenda.
There should be a packet right there.
Perfect, thank you.
So, committee reorganization, as we all know at this table, basically we have 3 phases of a project like this: design, construction, post-construction. We've closed out the design phase, and certainly the committee has operated lean and mean because it was operating a time was of the essence. Well, now that we've closed that out and we get into the construction phase of this, this actually becomes someone's home, our police chief, our police department, and certainly the town. I think it's time to consider expanding the committee. There will be a lot of more details, colors, IT, things that John Lucy, who is our deputy chief, and Mike, if I'm not mistaken, he's really your IT person.
Yeah.
To add John to the committee would be value add. And Chief, having you be a full voting member of the committee, this is now your house. It's important that you have full say in what you want to do. Not that you haven't, but it's just a transition. When we operated lean and mean to get us to this point, now more eyes, more hands on deck. I think one shares the load, but it brings you empirical knowledge that I for one don't have of what the inner workings of your building needs to be. And so the thought was I prepared a draft memo in our packet here, but the thought is to expand the committee, adding John Lucy, Mike Riley, and Martha Taylor. We're going to be, paperwork-wise, we're going to be overloaded with documentation coming in, and I think it's the appropriate time. So that certainly isn't a committee decision, but it would be my recommendation that we entertain providing that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for consideration, and then certainly they can take whatever course of action that they want. So Eric, what's your thoughts? Why don't we go right around the table, what's your thoughts on
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that during construction, there'll be a lot of smaller questions now, technical questions, in terms of the FF&E, which comes down to communication equipment and furnishings. And so having your point person that's already controlled that budget or managing that budget would be a great asset. So I would ask you to ask him. And then also in the field, when you're looking at something that the decision is needed, you go and view it, and report it, and make a decision. Because time is of the essence once you start doing things.
Del, what's your
Well,
experience with it?
Yeah, we always wind up having to have a lot of dialogue with the client and the user, find out exactly what they need and want. And that's always the case, so it would make sense to have someone accessible.
Mike, what's your feelings on it?
Makes perfect sense to me.
Steve, it's Steve, right?
Yes.
Steve, John, obviously, you're both kind of coming in on the tail end of this, but your life experience.
Oh yeah, look, when you get to
this phase, you need the chief's involvement. I mean, that's the day, you know, you need the users, the end users' involvement. It's helpful. And as you said, as we deal with things that are outside of the contractor's contract, FF&E, IT, yeah, have a few extra voices is not a bad thing, especially when they're the people who are gonna use the building at the end. And in fact, that's the key, having that person on the force who, you know, will deal with all that stuff after we're done and gone in a year. You know, it's great to have them involved at the front end.
Okay. Well, Eric, why don't you make a recommendation? Sure. Where it's really only me and you, I think, you know, our lean and mean work well to get this thing started, but,
I'll make a motion to accept your draft letter and propose that it be submitted to the Board of Selection for consideration.
okay, I'll second that, and we can review the letter when we get back to that point, but I'm just gonna go through the agenda. Very last couple of pages, so, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, review of August 16th meeting summary. Any comments, corrections, or concerns?
No comment.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll have a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so why don't you give us the bid results and update? I attached into the packet some information.
Well, as we had discussed previously, basically when the sub-bids came in, the sum total, as we know, was high. Only 3 of the bids were below the estimate, and all the others were above the estimate, with a overage of about 18% in total. And we immediately did some background research into why this might be happening, and contacted our estimator, and also had discussions with our engineers to find out if they could track down some of the very high pricing in the HVAC sector. And the feedback that we received was that specifically with HVAC, sheet metal work was apparently of a very high premium right now. For some, I'm not sure, nobody knew what the reason was, but it seemed like labor and material costs were really skyrocketing in that sector, and it caused that flux in the HVAC numbers. Fortunately, the electrical number actually came in slightly under the final estimate, so that wasn't of concern. But all the other, some of the other smaller sub-bid numbers were also very high, percentage-wise. And our estimator has responded that in his projects that he's estimated in the recent past, no bids have come in this high on average above his estimate. And he sees this as either an anomaly for some reason, people might be very busy and they're just throwing numbers at it, or there's a tick up in the pricing of.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
If you figure out how to disable that feature, I can't tell you how many times I'm doing something and my phone is reading a 1,000 words off an email.
He's concerned that if it's not an anomaly and a freak occurrence, that it might mean that construction costs in general are gonna go up. And it may have something to do with anticipation of additional costs due to things like economic conditions. And he's just not, he doesn't have any
I'm
logical
seeing the same
explanation.
thing, market conditions and labor costs.
Yeah.
All of the unions have just renegotiated, we're doing a number of big projects with requiring tile setters. And there's straight time and double time, there's no time and a half. And everyone's gotten a 10% bump. So, you add 10% on labor, 10% on materials,
Yeah.
you kind of wind up in this 18 to 20% variance that we
Yeah,
have.
so after consultation with them and then getting back to you, it was decided that postponing or rejecting any of these bids and rebidding would not necessarily give us better results. And because of time delays, we recommended that we proceed with those bids. And we did, and then the GC bid has come in, also, above the estimate, which was expected based on all of the sub-bids. However, the percentage overage is less, it is between 10 and 12% over. And that, again, was logical based on what we were seeing in the sub-bids. Once we have done a review of the DCAM, with DCAM regarding the low bidders, we can recommend to go ahead if that is what the committee would like to do.
Well, I mean, I think that we have the official results.
Yeah.
Now, there's certainly a vetting that needs to be done, and
Right.
certainly making sure that what has been presented is accurate. We don't have unknown, undisclosed OSHA or litigation factors that could sway us one way or the other. I mean, my feeling, Eric, is we're going to present this to the Board of Selectmen. That there was a conference call that myself, Zell, and John participated in, and Jeff Shaw. There was some confusion on the elevator sub-bid.
Yes, there was.
No confusion on my part, pretty clear on the documentation, but the elevator came in on the base bid, not as an alternate. They added a stop as the alternate, which then was outside the parameters of what the town was looking to do to carry this as an alternate. So both your teams got together, worked it out with the AG's office, and that's now being carried directly by the GC with an allowance, as I recall.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct. And the GC, whoever is actually awarded the contract, would then proceed and request pricing from qualified manufacturers for the elevator, which will then be balanced out after they have a contract with that firm. And it does not have to be rebid publicly. So,
Well, as we see on the alternates they've carried, just to go quickly through the general contractors, we had a range of bids from $6,086,000 to $7,539,000. So within the five bids, we have $1.5 million variance, which is not all that surprising. But actually, I take that back. That is actually very surprising.
I would throw out the last one.
yes,
Yeah.
that's just a,
Otherwise, you have pretty,
You've got a pretty,
Pretty tight-
you're
pretty tight
within
bids.
5%.
yeah.
The problem is, on all the file sub-bids, you didn't have the same pool. I mean, 68 bidders drew down docks. But I mean, I have to tell you, as we were saying, that the file sub-bids, the waterproofing one just takes my breath away. I mean,
yeah.
it's ridiculous. But that's part of the system, and we're not gonna change that. So,
Is it typical, John or Steve or Zell, that when the sub-bids are reviewed, that there's much changing or filling out of them? I mean,
In
like,
what way?
well, if you go through the low bidders, if you go through the sub-bids,
Mhm.
there's usually change from what the CM selected if it's proved for some reason that some of these are not qualified or have issues, or is it typically that this is the bid?
Well, only if we have knowledge of who the selected sub-bids were by HGC. I mean, that we would have to know that in order to vet out who
What
they
is-
used.
What does DCAM review though? What's are they reviewing the sub-bid?
No, it's more, it's us reviewing the validity of the bidder.
Yeah, there's very little movement on from a sub-bid standpoint, unless you have knowledge of,
Issues.
yeah, unless you have
Yes.
knowledge of issues, because the reality is, you know, you get their certificate, they're passing, and unless you see a less than 80, you know, it really doesn't raise a red flag, and if you see a less than 80, it was at one job, or, you know, really you reserve if I look at this list here, you know, obviously GVW, did they restrict to themselves?
Yeah, that's the same question. They usually do.
They usually do.
Yeah, so, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the only folks I don't think we've had a job with the Miss Metals guy. And it's nice to see a different name out there, because it's usually the same couple that bid, and it's usually over the estimate, way over. So to see one that was kinda close was actually nice to see.
candy stores being open to others.
Yeah, which is great, because usually Miss Mel's is one of the ones where we would be sitting here saying, I don't, you know, there's one roof ladder in the job, and, you know, it's on
Sure.
$150,000, you know? But, you know, most of these other folks, I think we've worked with all of them, ultimately, or are familiar with all of them, at least in some way, shape, or form. The Miss Metals guy is the only kind of new person to the dance. So yeah, so unless, you know, you see more changes, or from the standpoint of filed subs restricting from others, you know, I don't wanna play if this guy wins the job, so that's where we usually see the most,
Okay.
most movement, you know?
Have there been any challenges, or how does that work as far as one bidder challenging the low bidder?
Oh, if there's so basically.
How does, I mean, I'm not, again, I don't do
If
49,
somebody
149.
has an issue, they would file a bid protest, they would let us know, and then that would go right to Deb Anderson at the AG's office. And she would tell us very quickly if it were of the content that we shouldn't award a contract.
So nothing, on the filed sub-bids, we've not received any challenges?
No.
Not yet, I mean, it could, but
Yeah.
I don't see any.
But is there a time, is there a,
Period.
yeah, a statute of limitations on when they can do that?
Um,
Or is it up to when it's awarded?
I think it's really up, I don't know the answer to that question, but
Yeah.
typically, the one thing that the electronic bidding does is, it takes, you don't have that option at the table when it's done.
To review.
Somebody comes up and said, can I look at such and such?
Yeah.
That being said, because then you get an idea of what they're concerned about. However, they do have access online to just click on the other person's bid and see all of the non-proprietary pieces of it, so they don't get to look at the DCAM update statement, but they get to see the bid, they get to see who they carried for subpart E, which is the subs that happens on HVAC, such as insulation, automatic temperature control, sheet metal. So that's how Zell was able to get kind of that look into what was high about that HVAC bid, and they saw that the sheet metal was really, you know, the sheet metal number that was part of the 421 estimate, they got to see, oh wow, that was really kind of outside of what everyone was expecting. So, yeah, at the end of the day, unless you really have a problem with one of these companies, it kind of is what it is. This is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts way of making you play with 14 other low bidders, or however many we have here, 3, 6, 9, yeah, 14 other low bidders. So, on a project, like you said, it's the system, and this is kind of what we're stuck with.
Anything else to add, Sal?
No, I don't, without, the only thing I can add is that I don't think we've worked with BC Construction before. I don't know whether you have.
We have,
Okay, so at least there is some knowledge of.
I mean, I think we're gonna expect you to do your due diligence.
yeah.
Mhm.
Check references, or,
Mhm.
I mean, what we've seen in the past, subcontractors of ours, everything looks good, but then you find out they've got 2 outstanding OSHA violations that haven't quite been disclosed, or outstanding litigation.
Right.
Certainly, if they had any bonding claims, that would be a different story.
And we can't see that stuff until we get the
Get the
DCAM sheet. So those have been, I sent the email out yesterday, I think I copied both of you on it.
Did Tracy respond
I
to
have
it?
not seen Tracy's response back to that yet, so Tracy just needs to
Respond to it?
reply all to tell Jim at the state to, okay, release those files
Okay.
to us.
I'll
And then-
reach out to her, this morning to make sure she
Once,
does that.
once they get that email, it's probably, if Jim Goodrow at the state is having a slow day, he gets it all teed up, and he just waits for that email, and when he gets that email, he presses send, and then we get the files. It's much better, it's a much better system now. Previously, you would have to make an appointment to go into the city, sit at a desk, kind of go through the stuff yourself. Now, they PDF it, I signed a disclosure that said I wouldn't share any of the proprietary info with anybody else. Because there's financial information, there's legal
Right.
information in there, I would of course share it with you as the client, that's acceptable. But I can't then take that and just,
Yeah, I mean,
we can't post that on the town's website for review.
Well, I think, from my perspective anyway, is if there is a derogatory issue that
We could get-
questions, we address the issue. Getting that type of information, we can only get in trouble with it, where we inadvertently gets posted or
Oh, yeah.
becomes part of something, so. I think the end result of what your review is what we're looking for.
Yeah, we will come to you with a recommendation on who to move ahead with out of this list.
And anything, Eric, any questions for Zal, or what's your?
No, was looking at some other bids and saw that, like the Medford Library, which was bid in August, was posted 24 million advertised, and it came in at 18,
That's ours.
even 19 million.
I will tell you that the cost estimator in that one was as conservative as could be, and was padding that thing with, even at the end, he had kept $1 million into the contingency at the end. But for whatever reason, that is the exception. And being one of our projects, I am thrilled to no end that it came in so far under. But every other project we're dealing with right now, from
And
a
it's a
budget
library?
standpoint, it's a library.
Usually library costs.
I know.
Got
Listen.
had with all
I
the
know.
live load, dead load requirements and automation.
It's, we're very hopeful, but I will say that everything else we're dealing with right now is dealing with more of this situation. And the ones that are in budget, we get the estimate, we have the SD estimate, we move to DD, we get the DD estimate, we're like, what happened? It's grown, and now we've had to pull it back and pull it back. So Medford is wonderful.
30% under budget. Is that, you said it was 24?
Yeah,
was-
so we,
24.
so 24 was the last estimate with alternates. It came in at 19. The estimate before it was 23. They added $1 million right at the end, and the only reason the city was able to carry that is because when you submitted your budget to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, Medford was lucky. They got in the first round. So
Okay.
that budget of $33 million for the whole project had 3 years of escalation built into it. So we had that money available, so it's great for them being early to the dance, but the poor cities and towns that get invited in year 5, all of that money will have been absorbed.
So is there an equal project comparison in terms of location and recent bid that you know of?
I could tell you Drake at Fire Station that we bid, was, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can get it to you guys. It came in, we bid it, they wanted the numbers to be able to, they thought they had appropriated enough money. We rebid it, it came in higher, and in 6 months.
Time is of the essence.
6 months, it came in about 6-7% higher, so if you double that, you're at 12-14% higher for a year later, you know what I mean? So it's, you know, these numbers you're seeing percentage-wise are not, they're hard, they're terrible, they're just, you know, but it's the market conditions that we're dealing with, and a lot of times the estimators are struggling to catch up, so you end up either with a situation where they don't get it right,
Right.
or you end up with a situation like Medford where they just put you know, there were millions of dollars of what-ifs in that estimate.
Well, they went by available funding, that they had the funding approved.
There was less, I think there
Right.
was a little less concern, so there was some extra dollars in there, but I will tell you, you know, Drake is probably only a $4.5 million building, but the last time it was bid, it was just over 4, you know, and in 4 or 5 months, it added $400,000 for no change in scope.
On the Medford Library, was there a cluster of 4 or 5 bids all within the 5%?
So we only
was-
had 3 bids at the end of the day, because we
Okay.
pre-qualified 6 GCs and only 3 chose to bid it. Again, another sign that the market is very busy. And with alternates, I think they were 19, 20, and 21. So they were $1 million
10%.
separations, so you were
10%.
5 between and 10 between the first and the last, so.
And Essex bid comes in on October 30th, which is a, you know.
And I was talking to Peter Fippen, who's the selectman over there, and their whole thing was that if they didn't get out, they were projecting $700,000 increase over, you know, over their estimate if they missed the bid season.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is too, is as you get into smaller projects like this, the mobilization cost and overhead of managing them,
Well, it's a great
you
point.
can't amortize it out over
So we're actually
$10 million.
we're the OPM for Pentucket, so in West Newbury, right next door, that project. And the prices we're looking at for that are $600 something a square foot. I mean, it's crazy, but you're competing against a lot of these other big projects as well, where somebody can park an HVAC crew for 2 years on a project versus a smaller, and
That's exactly right.
I think the small guys are getting hit with, well, I'll give you a number, sure, it's work, but I've got these other meatier jobs that, you know, we're competing against. When the economy crashed the last time, all of the dead wood got weeded out from a contractor standpoint, and the people that are left are all busy, and they're printing money for themselves. You know, they're really,
It's either feast or famine.
they are, it's,
It's unfortunate. You know what it is, the market conditions.
it is.
The filed sub bids in this type of market is punitive. Where in a lean and mean market, it probably works to the advantage of
Right.
the client, but.
Right. And all of the things you see when you drive through the city, you know, all of the tower cranes and the buildings, that takes away resources, you know, from us, so.
Anything else, Eric, you want to add?
It's as busy as it's ever been in Boston.
Yeah, I agree. Chief, what's your thoughts on this?
Let's just build a building. You know,
There you go.
I'm at the point, everything's come in higher. We expected things to come in higher. I didn't expect 20% higher, but, you know, we have a great design. It's lean. I just want to bring it to the people and see if we can get more money, or bring it to the town, see if they can give us more money, just to get this thing done. I mean, the more we delay it, the more we kick it down the road, just the more expensive it's gonna get.
we know we've operated, time is of the essence, and case in point, it's really remarkable from the Merrimack bids back in March to the Newbury bids in October, they have a 20% variance. So, all right. John, why don't you go over staffing levels, do a quick update on how Kevin's doing? and-
Sure, so Kevin, as you all know, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, had some medical issues. He is currently on short-term disability for us while he heals. His return is, we don't know. We don't know when he's gonna come back. So to do right by you, it felt like we needed to change the PM on the project. And I think we're, given that Steve is also on the job in Pentucket next door, he's up here a lot, and it just made sense geographically to have him, jump into this. If Kevin were to come back in 2 weeks, that's one thing, but I don't think Kevin's coming back in 2 weeks, and that's the thing. So we need to plan for the long term. So, so we feel like Steve's probably is the best fit, for Newbury. As far as once this thing, gets a successful vote, we will come to you with who our assistant PM on site will be. But until the job's, until we know it's in and we know we're gonna contract, I haven't made those final machinations to tell you who our on-site person's gonna be every day. But we've got a couple of ideas right now, and we're just waiting to see what happens, at town meeting.
I'd just add that, make sure that you have a sit down with our town administrator.
And we have
work. How do you
traded back.
communicate?
I think we're gonna try to pull that off to bring Steve up next week, and do it. We just weren't able to do it this week. My schedule didn't work with hers, and then she said she wasn't gonna be here. I suggested after this meeting today, but she let me know she wasn't gonna be here. So, we'll do it next week.
Okay. Any questions, Eric, any questions? Steve, Chief, Zell, good job. All right, project schedule. Zell, I want to apologize, I was sending Zell an email saying, can you update the project schedule? Turn to your last page of your packet, and it's like, it's all of 37 seconds of work for me to just create it.
No, but I had,
You,
you.
well, yeah, no, you had, and but there's dates that were,
Whatever.
what we did at the town level, we had suggested to the town administrator and the selectmen that they consider moving back the special town meeting, typically scheduled for the middle of October, to the first week or two of November, just anticipating how this was going out to bid and when the results were going to be in. And then not knowing what market conditions or labor costs were going to be. So this is the project schedule. This is still a draft. So we went through, we had our bid results came in yesterday. Today, with our meeting. Eric, I'm thinking that if our schedules allow that, the committee should consider meeting next Friday, so that, one, we'll get feedback from you, you should have your
We should.
DCAM stuff.
We should.
We can then prepare our
The final number
number
for
and
the warrant.
memo, well, to the Board of Selectmen, that would be our next step.
Right.
Okay, because it all
So
depends.
they know what the final,
We'll provide an update and a memo with all the supporting
Yep.
data, but I wanna make sure we have it in the proper format.
sure,
The Board of Selectmen's next meeting is October 22nd.
okay.
So, Eric, how's your schedule for next Friday?
So far, so good.
Okay. I mean, I don't think, Zell, John, I don't think you have to be here, obviously, as long as you get us the information.
Sure.
The committee just needs to be able to review the format of the draft memo that I'll craft, and then sign off on it so we can release it and forward it
So
to
we would,
the.
so in that would be the recommendation that hopefully we can get, we get
Yeah.
the info, we get we review it, we.
Both
we
of
need to
you are
speak.
going to send a memo
Yep.
of where we're at that is going to be attached as as an exhibit to our report to the Board of Selectmen. Okay. So,
And town meeting is on the 28th, correct?
no, it's November 12th
I'm
is the
sorry.
town, Tuesday, November
Okay.
12th. So what I'd like to have you do is make sure that you both will have a representative there
Sure.
at town meeting. The selectmen will, they're the final decision makers on whether they're going to accept or reject the bids as filed.
Yeah.
If they accept the bids, then we are over our budget. They will then have to determine the vehicle in which they want to fund that shortfall. Whether that is to go back and seek an increase of bond authority, or utilize free cash that's on hand that amazingly has been certified at $2.8 million. And I think, just a little empirical knowledge, I got on the finance committee back in 2008. We had a junk bond rating, and when DCR certified our free cash in October of 2008, or thereabouts, we had a negative 130,000 free cash certification. I didn't think it was even possible.
Yeah, positive.
In 2009, it was at the height of the bank crisis. We took in less money in revenue, whether it was from the tax levy, excise tax collections were down $650,000. So even with the 2.5% property tax increase, we had a $300,000 operating deficit from our previous year. Again, never thought that was possible in government and at the local level. And Mike's team, they had a scheduled pay raise. And his team got together and they decided to forego their pay raise so we didn't have to lay off one of their patrolmen. So that's why this is pretty personal for me to get this done. To now have a AAA rating, $2.8 million in free cash, a capital improvement plan that's been mapped out for the next 20 years. The town has come a long way in a relatively short period of time. And hence why we get a AAA rating. So that's, all right. So, town meeting is November 12th. As a placeholder, Zell, I just put in we're gonna know November 12th, whether there's a project going forward or not, whether it's, I just put a placeholder for contract signed
Right.
November 18th.
Yeah, I think that's probably within there's statutory limitations.
I think we had 40 days.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is exactly.
It's 30 working days, which ends up being 45 calendar days,
Okay.
plus or minus.
Okay.
So,
So obviously, I'm going by what your schedule said in the past. You sign the contract, then the notice to proceed follows,
Mhm.
okay? And then substantial completion is just 365 days
Yeah,
later.
it's 300.
So 30 working days would put you at that November 22nd date to sign a contract. So it's tight, you know,
Yeah.
it's tight.
Well,
It's
again,
tight in
this
there,
is-
but it's,
We,
but it's doable.
we've got 6 extra days between town meeting.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing that says that couldn't be moved up. Again, I put this together as a draft schedule.
Yeah, no, look, as long as you know that, and after speaking with the selectmen, letting them know the time is tight, and that if, this is successful at town meeting, we gotta go.
Yeah.
We can have a contract ready to send to the local.
We have, Zell and Jeff have worked with town council. We have an approved draft contract ready to
It's
go.
ready to go.
Just gotta plug in numbers
Yeah, that's great.
and
Fill in
final
the name.
authority.
Just fill in.
Yeah, so that's
Number.
it. All right, well, why don't I'm gonna leave this draft schedule as, this will become the schedule, subject to change. And Zell, I'm just gonna update this, I'm not gonna
No,
bother
that's,
you to,
okay, that's,
well,
that's fine.
we're sitting there
Well,
spending
you-
half of, 6 emails going back and forth, and it's like,
You have imperative knowledge that I don't about the town, so, you know, you're,
I was being too respectful of the territory you no longer wanted to manage.
Fabulous.
All right, so next meeting date, Eric, why don't we keep that, if that's okay with you, for
Friday,
October 22nd, and I'll post that meeting.
Friday, October 18th. The 22nd is the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Oh, excuse me, October 18th.
Are you gonna post one for the Board of Selectmen too, so if we're all there?
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. I will, I'll do that as a joint meeting. Okay, so I'll post that. So our meeting, a week from today, will simply be to finalize the documentations for approval prior to submittal.
and our attendance is not necessary at either of those meetings. We will forward our recommendations.
I think you can send those to me, and
Yeah.
we can certainly,
Okay.
you know, go back and forth on that. And
Yeah, if you think you need us at the Board of Selectmen meeting, just,
Well, I mean, I think at this point, this whole process has been open and transparent.
yeah,
We're gonna go back and look at our estimate of probable cost, and we've gone from 6.7 to 7.8 to 7. We just we adjust the budget as, or the estimate.
Right.
As the information
It is
becomes
what- right,
available. yeah.
Right, it is
So
what it
it's-
is, right.
yeah. But the one thing that is fixed is our budget. So that will be the issue that the selectmen and certainly town meeting will be the final decision maker on that.
sure.
All right, so if you turn, there is a updated schedule of probable cost. And again, I found it helpful to me is, as we update it, just add a column so you get the comparisons to where we've been at. So if you look at this, in January of 2019, we were at 6.7 million. March of 2019, we were at 7.8 million. Up until we opened these bids, we were at 6.9 million. Now, certainly, we've always used the pro forma that we look through the rearview mirror over the last 6 months for bid results, which Merrimack represented the closest project to in our region and to our size. And so we were using their bid results, square footage. That's not an ideal way of doing it, but for lack of a better way of doing it, that's what we were carrying. And so obviously things have come in 20% higher. So what we've done is we've modified that schedule where we have the construction cost base bid is $6,086,314, correct? The alternate bid cost total, $331,987. And the other line items haven't changed. The project contingency, line 36, we've been carrying 5% of construction. That has been raised to $320,000, basically $321,000. And that's simply 5% of the base bid and alternate bids combined. Now, if the town decides not to do the alternate bids, then we'll adjust that. But 5% is the minimum I would feel comfortable with.
Mhm.
Towns typically, if they're trying to make the numbers work, could reduce that down to $100,000.
Keep it
Not
in mind.
enough.
They know that they're going to be coming back in, but they're trying to make it work to get the bid, be able to award the bid. So, that's where we're at, gents, and I think the big thing is do your review, make sure we've got qualified bidders, we don't have any surprises. We'll package this up next Friday, and we'll present it the following Tuesday for the selectmen for their consideration. All right,
Sounds good.
that's it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?